just basically shows you the different progressions in valving so that you understand that. Here's the graph that's the most important thing for you to understand about shock absorbers. Many companies rate a shock absorber, they pick a speed, and they rate their shock absorbers at that speed. So for example purposes, we're going to say, all right, we want to know what our shock is. You want to know, is my shock a 3? Is it a 5.3? What is it? Okay? My question is, at what speed do you want to know that? And you're going to go, well, that's confusing. I just want to know what it is. Okay? So if we are in that situation where we have to tell you what it is, so that when you're talking the talk with your buddies and he's got a 3.6 and you're running a 3.8 on the right front, you have this lingo to talk to, that's perfectly fine. However, you can see here, if we pick the 3 or the 6-inch rating, there's totally 3 different shock absorbers in 3 different situations. But they would still all rate the same at 6 inches per second. Now, I'll guarantee you, if every one of you tried all 3 of these shocks, you would go, holy crap, I can't believe there's so much difference in this shock. I thought you said it was a 3.7 or something. Well, it is at 6 inches per second. So that's the thing it is when you're comparing to other brands of shocks and things like that. Nowadays, there is so much more to the story that you need to understand. We'll take this black line, or at least I think it's a black line, in this particular situation, the one that has the long dashes. That particular shock absorber is a common shock absorber for a right front of a high horsepower car with a spoiler, a USMTS car. Those cars, what they have to do is we have to get the car down into the corner, and then they have all this aerodynamic in the back of them keeping that car hooked on the left rear. So now the cars are very aero unbalanced. So we have to trick the car into thinking that the right front is super stiff to allow that car to rotate through the corner without hooking that left rear too fast. So it's a big difference in how we build the shock. Okay? Then we're going to look at the one that's the solid line. That would be an average right front. Pretty much what we would run on an IMCA car or your cars. That would be pretty common what we would run on a standard 3.6 shock or whatever. Now, our slick shock actually is a little bit more like that smaller dashed line, especially for a sport mod car, because we want to trick the shock into thinking right when you first enter the corner, it needs to lock it down on the left or the right front tire so that the car could pivot around the right front. All makes sense. However, we need to work on weight transfer to allow your car to let go and transfer the weight back to the left rear. So when the shock absorber, when you first hit the corner, right front shock will normally be somewhere in the neighborhood of your 13 inches per second of travel. But as it comes up off the corner and the weight's starting to transfer, the right front shock actually starts to slow down. So then we can actually go off of the low speed part of the shock and release that load and let the car to come back. So it's all dependent on, nowadays, what type of racing you do, what the actual car is. So like when somebody calls and orders a shock today, we almost need to know what color the decals are to that point of what you're actually doing so that we can get the best product for you. And that's the way the shock industry is. So it's just important that you understand that. I'm not sitting here telling you you need to have 50 shocks in your trailer, because you really don't. On the average customer, if they race a lot in different situations and different combinations of racetracks, 9 shocks is all you'd ever need. If you race quite a bit, most general conditions, 8 shocks would be all you need. Most of the time, I'll recommend to a customer either a package of 8 or a package of 7. What that does is that gives you a set for all your base conditions, or like a heavier rough type condition, and it gives you a set for all your slick conditions, depending on what you want it to do. So all depends on the race track, depends on your driver, depends on where you race.